What's the funniest reason you've been called into school to collect your child? The nurse called saying my 6-year-old had an incident and needed to go home immediately. Her voice was strange, like she was trying not to laugh, but also sounded slightly panicked about the whole situation. When I arrived at the school, she led me down the hallway past confused-looking teachers and staff members who kept glancing at me with barely contained smiles and whispering to each other behind their hands. I could hear muffled giggling and what sounded like frustrated sighs coming from behind a closed classroom door at the very end of the hall. The nurse paused before opening it and said, "You might want to prepare yourself for this because we've never encountered anything quite like this before in all our years of teaching." She opened the door and there was my daughter Emma sitting alone at a desk in the middle of the room wearing what looked like a full hazmat suit made entirely of clear plastic wrap and silver duct tape. She had somehow managed to cover herself completely from head to toe, leaving only tiny crooked holes for her eyes and mouth that made her look like a demented space alien or mummy from a horror movie. The teacher, Mrs. Johnson, stepped forward, trying desperately to keep a straight face, and explained that during their morning science lesson about germs and bacteria, Emma had raised her hand very seriously and announced to the entire class that her mommy always says she catches everything that goes around, so she needed proper protection from all the dangerous classroom germs. Apparently, during morning recess, she had convinced 3 of her most gullible classmates to help wrap her up like a human burrito using supplies she had somehow smuggled out of the art room, including an entire roll of plastic wrap and half a roll of duct tape that belonged to the janitor. They had done such a thorough and enthusiastic job wrapping every inch of her body that when lunchtime rolled around, they discovered the plastic wrap had twisted and tightened so much around her that they couldn't get it off without professional medical scissors. Emma had been stuck in her homemade hazmat suit for over 3 hours, but seemed completely unbothered by the increasingly uncomfortable and sweaty situation she had created. Mrs. Johnson said she had even attempted to eat her entire peanut butter and jelly sandwich by somehow maneuvering it through the tiny crooked mouth hole she had created while making satisfied humming sounds, like everything was perfectly normal. My daughter looked at me through her lopsided eye holes and said very proudly, "Mom, I didn't catch a single germ today, and I helped teach the whole class about proper safety protocols just like the real doctors on TV shows." The school nurse handed me a pair of medical safety scissors and said with a completely straight face that Emma had absolutely refused to let anyone else cut her out because, and I quote, "they haven't been properly sterilized according to medical standards, and she doesn't trust their sanitation technique." I spent the next 20 minutes carefully cutting through multiple layers of tightly wound plastic wrap, while Emma gave me very detailed step-by-step instructions about proper sterile procedures she had apparently learned from watching medical documentaries with her grandmother. When I finally freed her, she was completely drenched in sweat but grinning from ear to ear like she had just accomplished something truly amazing and groundbreaking. She looked around at all the adults who had gathered to watch this bizarre extraction process and announced that tomorrow she was planning to bring a real surgical mask and gloves because plastic wrap gets way too hot and makes it hard to breathe properly during long school days. The principal just shook his head and said, "Well, at least she takes personal hygiene very seriously these days," which is more than we can say for most students. On the drive home, Emma asked if we could stop at the pharmacy to buy proper surgical gloves for tomorrow because her hands felt very germy after touching the car door handle and she wanted to be fully prepared for school the next day.